Friedrich Nietzsche. Just the name alone stirs unrest, a challenge for anyone daring enough to dive into his thought. We're not talking about just any philosopher, but someone who shook the foundations of Western culture, who questioned everything that seemed solid and eternal, from God to morality to the very idea of truth. Nietzsche didn't come to comfort. He came to provoke, to poke at the deepest wounds of human existence, and force us to face the abyss we carry inside. Imagine a man who, still young, lost his father and saw life's fragility up close, who grew up in a strict religious upbringing but instead of conforming, chose to break away from everything imposed on him. A man who feared neither loneliness nor suffering, because he knew that only by confronting these shadows could he find the light of authenticity. Nietzsche is that restless spirit, challenging you to abandon easy certainties and face life with courage, even when it seems meaningless. On this channel, we'll unravel together the life and ideas of this giant of philosophy. We'll understand how his sharp words, powerful metaphors, and radical vision still echo today, inspiring those who seek more than ready-made answers. Those who seek the freedom to think and live for themselves. Get ready for an intense journey that will stir your emotions, beliefs, and maybe even change how you see the world. Because Nietzsche isn't just a philosopher, he's an invitation for you to become who you truly are. Are you ready for this adventure? Friedrich Nietzsche was born on October 15, 1844, in Rücken, a small Prussian village surrounded by rolling fields and the silence of rural life. The son of Karl Ludwig Nietzsche, a respected Lutheran pastor, and Franziska Oehler, Friedrich, grew up in an environment marked by faith, discipline, and the weight of family expectations. His father, a central figure in his childhood, was admired in the community for his religious zeal and compelling sermons. For young Friedrich, home was an extension of the church, daily prayers, Bible readings, and a strong sense of moral duty that seemed unquestionable. But this serene world was abruptly shattered when at the age of 5 Nietzsche lost his father to a devastating brain disease. Grief fell over the family like a permanent shadow. His mother, now a widow, took on the upbringing of Friedrich and his younger sister Elizabeth with renewed rigor and devotion. The sensitive and introspective young Nietzsche felt doubly orphaned, deprived of his father and the lightness of childhood. The domestic environment became even more rigid, dominated by women, mother, grandmother, aunts, who despite their care, imposed strict rules and left little room for questioning. Sent to a Lutheran school, Nietzsche's education reinforced discipline and obedience. He stood out for his early intelligence but also for his shyness and thoughtful gaze, always searching for something beyond what was taught. He was fascinated by music, literature, and nature, spending solitary hours wandering the fields, allowing himself to dream and imagine worlds different from the one he lived in. These moments of contemplation planted the seeds of an unrest that would follow him throughout his life, the search for meaning in a universe that increasingly seemed indifferent to certainty. Nietzsche's adolescence was marked by a growing silent rebellion. Instead of openly defying his mother or teachers, he immersed himself in books, the Greek and Latin classics, and Beethoven's music, which deeply moved him. The young Friedrich began to silently question the absolute truths imposed on him. If God was the foundation of everything, why did he allow so much suffering? If morality was unquestionable, why did many good people suffer unjustly? These doubts, initially kept secret, became the engine of his philosophical quest. Nietzsche found inspiration in the ancient Greeks, especially Homer, Socrates, and Plato, to think beyond the limits imposed by tradition. His fascination with Greek tragedy, which acknowledged pain and chaos as inevitable parts of existence, contrasted with the Christian optimism of his upbringing. He realized life was not only order and light, but also shadow and conflict. This realization led him to value the courage to face suffering without resorting to comforting illusions. Gradually, Nietzsche distanced himself from the faith that had shaped his childhood. There was no sudden break, but a slow and painful process of detachment. He still respected his mother and family tradition but could no longer accept the ready-made answers offered by religion. He felt increasingly alone but also freer to seek his own truth. This solitude, far from being only a burden, became a source of creative strength. Nietzsche learned to live with the discomfort of uncertainty and made that discomfort the starting point of his philosophy. Thus, the birth of the philosopher was not a single event but a journey, from sheltered childhood to adolescent unrest, from inherited faith to creative doubt. Nietzsche discovered early that life is made of losses and ruptures, but also of unimaginable possibilities for those who dare to think for themselves. His rebellion was not loud but profound, not against people but against ideas that hinder the flourishing of the spirit. At 24, Friedrich Nietzsche was already an academic prodigy. In 1869, he was appointed professor of classical philology at the University of Basel in Switzerland, an impressive achievement for someone so young, especially in such a demanding field. Philology, the deep study of ancient languages and literature, might have seemed distant from philosophy at first glance, but for Nietzsche, it was the gateway to an intellectual revolution that would shake the foundations of Western thought. At Basel, Nietzsche immersed himself in the works of great Greek and Roman authors, especially Greek tragedy, which fascinated him for how it expressed the complexity of human existence. For him, tragedy was not mere entertainment or art. It was a way to confront raw reality with all its pain, contradictions, and beauty. This vision led him to write The Birth of Tragedy, 1872, a work that already revealed his radical critique of European culture. In this book, Nietzsche presents a dichotomy between two fundamental forces of art and life, the Apollonian and the Dionysian. The Apollonian represents order, rationality, form, and serene beauty, qualities associated with the god Apollo. The Dionysian symbolizes chaos, intense emotion, ecstasy, and intoxication, linked to the god Dionysus. Nietzsche argued that original Greek tragedy was the synthesis of these two forces, a balance between reason and passion, reflecting the totality of human existence. But, he said, modern Western culture had lost this balance, favoring the Apollonian at the expense of the Dionysian. Reason, science, and rigid morality had stifled the vitality and creative force of the human spirit. This critique was a first step toward his philosophy, an invitation for humans to find the courage to embrace life in all its contradictions and challenges. During his time at Basel, Nietzsche also befriended important intellectual figures like composer Richard Wagner, who embodied for him the Dionysian force of art. Their friendship, initially intense and inspiring, eventually soured due to deep disagreements, especially when Nietzsche began questioning Wagner's nationalism and Christianity. This break marked a crucial stage in Nietzsche's philosophical independence, as he refused to follow any master or closed system. Besides philosophy and philology, Nietzsche loved music and literature. His artistic sensitivity permeated his writings, which often approached poetry and aphorism, aiming not only to convey ideas but to provoke deep emotions and reflections. He believed philosophy should be lived, not just studied, a call for readers to challenge their own beliefs and limits. Academic life was not easy for Nietzsche. His fragile health, marked by migraines and vision problems, made constant work difficult. He also faced social isolation as his ideas began to shock colleagues and academic authorities. The courage to question established values came at a high cost, and Nietzsche knew his journey would be lonely. Yet, it was this solitude that fueled his creativity. Nietzsche did not seek easy acceptance. He wanted truth, even if that truth was uncomfortable, disturbing, and revolutionary. His time at Basel was the laboratory where he began forging tools to dismantle the illusions of Western culture and propose a new way of thinking about existence. Advancing in his philosophical reflection, Nietzsche reached a crucial point, a profound critique of Western morality and the culture that sustained it. In a 19th-century Europe marked by a crisis of traditional values, he proclaimed a phrase that shocked and continues to provoke debate: God is dead. This statement was not a simplistic atheism, but a dramatic diagnosis of the collapse of certainties that had until then given life meaning. Nietzsche observed that Christian faith, which for centuries had been the moral and metaphysical foundation of Western culture, was losing its power in the face of science, rationalism, and critical thought. The death of God symbolized the loss of an absolute foundation for truth and values. Without this foundation, the world seemed empty, meaningless, and humanity faced the risk of nihilism, the feeling that life has no purpose, value, or direction. Why was this crisis so profound? Nietzsche argued that Christian morality, which he called slave morality, had inverted life's natural values. What was once considered strong, courageous, and life-affirming became evil. What was weak, submissive, and humble became good. This inversion, he said, weakened humans by denying their vital instincts and will to power, the creative force that drives life toward overcoming and expansion. Nietzsche saw this morality as a creation of oppressed classes, projecting their submissive values onto a transcendental God to control and limit the strong and creative. He called this resentment, a feeling of envy and impotence that generates a morality denying life and promoting conformity. Although dominant, this morality was, for Nietzsche, a dangerous illusion preventing authentic individual flourishing. With God dead, what remained? Nietzsche did not see nihilism as an end, but as a transitional moment. The void left by the loss of old certainties had to be faced, and new values created that affirmed life, will, and freedom. This process he called revaluation of all values, the task of re-evaluating and reinventing the principles guiding human existence. Nietzsche proposed that humans break free from inherited moral chains and take responsibility for creating their own values based on life affirmation and expression of the will to power. This creation would not be easy or comfortable. It required courage to face chaos, pain, and uncertainty, but opened the way to a more authentic and vibrant existence. Art, for Nietzsche, played a fundamental role in this process. It does not seek absolute truths but shapes life's chaos, allowing individuals to experience the world intensely and creatively. Philosophy, in turn, should be a vital activity that challenges and transforms, not a closed, dogmatic system. This chapter reveals a thinker unafraid of the abyss, confronting it head-on and inviting readers to do the same. The death of God is not a call to despair, but an invitation to radical freedom, the freedom to create, affirm life, and reinvent oneself continuously. After denouncing the crisis of traditional values and the nihilism installed with the death of God, Nietzsche proposed a bold path to overcoming existential emptiness, the concept of the Übermensch, or Overman. More than a mere ideal, the Overman represents humanity's goal to transcend its limitations, break free from inherited morality, and affirm life in its full. Nietzsche systematically introduced the term Übermensch in his work. Thus spoke Zarathustra, where he presents this figure as one who goes beyond the common man, creating his own values and living according to his will, without relying on external norms or dogmas. The Overman is not a fixed entity or final state, but a continuous process of self-overcoming. The ability to constantly reinvent oneself, surpass one's limits, and affirm existence with courage and creativity. At the heart of this philosophy lies the will to power, Wille zur Macht, which Nietzsche describes as the fundamental force driving all life. This will is not merely a desire for external domination, but the expression of an inner force, seeking growth, expansion, and transformation. For the Overman, the will to power is the vital energy that leads him to create new values, challenge conventions, and live intensely, even in the face of suffering and uncertainty. Nietzsche rejects the idea of happiness as life's highest goal, seeing happiness as a passive and fleeting state destined for the masses. For the Overman, true value lies in love of struggle, danger, and constant challenge. He embraces risk and adversity as opportunities to strengthen and affirm himself. This radical stance contrasts with traditional morality, which values security, humility, and conformity. Another fundamental aspect of the Overman is amor fati, love of fate. This idea means accepting life with all its pain, mistakes, and limitations, without regrets or desire for change. The Overman says yes to life, embracing every experience as essential to his existence and growth. This radical acceptance opposes life denial, typical of religions and philosophies promising rewards in an afterlife. Nietzsche also criticizes the idea of equality and the elevation of humanity as a whole. For him, humanity is an abstraction, an anthill of individuals, many mediocre and conformist. Effort should be directed toward developing superior individuals capable of rising above the masses and creating new values for humanity. The Overman is this exceptional individual who does not join just anyone but seeks equally strong partners to continue the species' evolution. Education for Nietzsche must be rigorous and disciplined, preparing body and soul for constant struggle. The Overman masters his passions and will, refusing to be dominated by fleeting feelings like romantic love, which Nietzsche saw as a potential impediment to good sense and autonomy. This controversial view reinforces the idea that the Overman lives by his own rules, far from common social conventions. In summary, Nietzsche's Overman is an invitation to courage, creativity, and self-affirmation. He represents the possibility of transcending nihilism and mediocrity, building an authentic and vibrant existence. Nietzsche challenges us to abandon illusions and face life with open eyes, creating our own paths and meanings. After years of intense intellectual production, marked by revolutionary ideas and relentless critique of Western culture, Friedrich Nietzsche faced one of the darkest periods of his life. From 1889 onward, his mental health rapidly deteriorated, culminating in a collapse that forever removed him from academic and public life. This final chapter of his journey reveals not only the fragility of the man behind the genius, but also the lasting impact of his ideas that continue to resonate in contemporary thought. Nietzsche spent his last years in isolation, cared for by his mother and later his sister Elizabeth. The crisis that struck him was devastating. He suffered a mental breakdown in Turin, Italy, when he witnessed the suffering of a whipped horse, a gesture symbolizing his profound sensitivity and empathy. From then on, Nietzsche lived in a state of confusion and dementia, unable to continue his philosophical work. This phase is marked by fragmented letters and writings reflecting a conflicted mind, but still charged with singular emotional intensity. Despite the personal tragedy, Nietzsche's legacy was not erased. His works, mostly published between 1872 and 1888, had already begun influencing thinkers, artists, and writers, although his public recognition grew mainly after his death. Nietzsche left no direct followers or formal philosophical school, but his ideas paved the way for currents such as existentialism, post-structuralism, and postmodern philosophy. One of the most striking aspects of Nietzsche's legacy is his radical critique of Judeo-Christian morality, which he saw as central to the weakening of humans in modernity. His denunciation of slave morality and the proposal for the revaluation of all values challenged the foundations of traditional ethics, stimulating profound debates about life's meaning, freedom, and authenticity. Nietzsche also anticipated many themes central to modern psychology, especially psychoanalysis. His analysis of the struggle between instinctual drives and cultural impositions influenced Sigmund Freud and Carl Gustav Jung, who acknowledged affinities between their theories and Nietzsche's. Exploration of the unconscious, inner conflicts, and self-creation are direct inheritances of Nietzschean thought. Furthermore, the concept of will to power, developed as the driving force of life and nature, became a cornerstone of contemporary philosophy. This idea breaks with the traditional view of an ordered and rational world, presenting existence as a dynamic and chaotic flow where power and transformation are constant. Nietzsche deeply influenced postmodern philosophy, especially in deconstructing absolute truths and criticizing dominant discourses. His rejection of objective truth and defense of perspectivism opened paths for thinkers like Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida, who explored power, knowledge, and language relations. Finally, the Overman, Nietzsche's ideal of a being who creates his own values and affirms life in its entirety, remains a challenge and inspiration for those seeking an authentic and courageous existence. Nietzsche invites us to face nihilism's Abyss not with despair, but with the creative force of will and passion. Friedrich Nietzsche was not just a philosopher, he was a revolutionary of thought, a provocateur who challenged humanity's certainties and invited us to create our own values. In this video, we'll explore the life and ideas of this restless genius who forever changed the way we think about God, morality, power, and existence. Get ready for an intense and transformative journey that will stir your emotions and inspire you to question everything. Subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any episode of this unmissable series.